Welcome to Invest in Sqft, the podcast where we dig deep into the world of real estate and uncover the secrets to success. I'm your host, Matt Shields, and today's episode is nothing short of fascinating. Joining us is the insightful Grant Shipman, here to unravel the mysteries behind co-living startups and their journeys. We'll explore what makes these innovative spaces tick and discuss the secret ingredients that could revolutionize the future of co-living. And it could be a well-crafted household system. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just curious about co-living, this episode is packed with valuable lessons and exciting possibilities. So let's get comfortable and let's dive into this fascinating discussion with Grant Shipman. Let's get to work.
Oh, are we there?
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is where I learned the difference about strength. So my dad obviously is very handy. My brother is a general contractor, and I am very self-aware that I'm none of those things. So I recently somehow I got a house with an 840 square foot deck that needed to be redone. So I redid that, but it was just because I wanted to practice this idea I had that something, because I hate crap. I'm like, why am I doing this? If I'm working on my car, I know it's going to take 3 times as long. I'm going to screw it up and I don't enjoy it. But I thought, I think I can figure out how to enjoy this. So I listened to one of the Macklemore albums over and over again and listened to some Jeff Bezos books. And I had a great time, and the deck looks okay. And it's on top of a garage. So it is completely safe no matter how I built it. But no, that's where I learned. I was around it. I understand it as much as I can, but neither something I'm good at, nor do I enjoy. I never had a challenge of getting attracted to doing the work of fix and flipping is an easy real estate way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually talk about how you got into real estate. Was this something that you did early on? Did it happen later on in life? I'm curious how your trajectory went from growing up into getting into real estate.
It was the whole real credit to my parents was in some key ways, I was different from them. Both my parents were their whole lives W-2 employees that were teachers for years at the same place and worked hard and were awesome. And that just never appealed to me. And so they had the goal, just like a lot of people in their generation, like, I want to own my own home. I want that to be debt free, but never had rental properties, never any kind of short-term rentals. There wasn't any discussion about that. I think my dad, like a lot of people, joked around about he's going to start some company with his sons, that kind of whatever hot opportunity is. But that was just more fun discussion. So for me with real estate, I was so ignorant to it that when I was getting excited about, hey, the world needs these co-living houses. I didn't know the term co-living at that time. It wasn't a term at that time, but they need these supportive houses, these homes where people pretty much like households for the householdless, for lack of a better phrase. When I saw that, I thought, because I didn't understand real estate, I thought, wow, I need to become independently wealthy. And then maybe when I'm like 55 or 60 years old, I can afford a couple of these houses, and then people can enjoy this stuff that right now only the hippies, the house co-sharers, the intentional living community knows about, and most other people aren't going to stumble upon because there's weird things like we have a vegan kitchen or clothing optional Tuesday or these different odd packaging that the intentional living community has, and they're wonderful, but mainstream is always going to miss these hidden jewels of shared life.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
So yeah. Oh, so you had asked, man, I got off on a rabbit trail. You had asked, how did I get into it? That was how I had no clue about real estate. How I got into it was I thought, hey, I was renting a room. I was delivering Domino's pizza, and I wanted to get married and have a family, but I wanted to not just be able to financially support them, which Domino's wasn't going to do the trick, but I wanted to be able to have the time to enjoy them. My dad often wasn't home until 6:30. He would work through the weekends. And I wanted to build on, in a lot of ways, what my dad, all these strengths he did, like passing the baton. I wanted to take those and improve them. And so I was at this odd point in my life of not knowing what to do. And a guy gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, the book, and it was like, oh, wow. Okay. So I can learn business stuff. And then I listened to the Keller Williams people and Brandon Turner on Bigger Pockets. I was studying all the stuff and I realized, hey, if I work really hard, I can get financial freedom in 10 years, as long as I have no mistakes and everything goes well. And I thought that's really tough, but I was committed. And so that's when I got introduced to real estate. Simply, I still hadn't connected the dots between my desire to share co-living with the world and this. I just was looking at it from the Rich Dad Poor Dad perspective. Hey, rental real estate is a really easy way to learn business system. So I'm going to start here and then we'll see where it goes. But even at that point, real estate was very boring to me. I didn't realize that it's nothing to do with properties and all of these numbers. It has everything to do with people, right? Like everything. So that's how I got into it, was just a way to learn business systems. That was it.
Yeah, and you didn't know about co-living or anything like that at this point. Did you go down we'll call it the traditional real estate path first, where maybe you're buying some houses or rentals and just renting them out in a traditional fashion, or did you jump right into this other, call it management method?
Yeah, that's a really good term for it, a management method. Some people think it's an investment approach. Sure. But really, it's a management method, just like the same property can be used for short-term rentals or fill in the blank. So for me, it clicked as I was getting started. So for 17 years, I had lived part of the intentional living community. I had an early marriage fail, and I did this unexpected thing and moved in with a bunch of wonderful hippies. And I learned, wow, this shared housing, people struggle with, say, imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a healthy household, you know that you're not tricking those people. They know exactly who you are. And if you have a healthy household and you're part of that, and I'm not talking about a healthy work family, right? Or a healthy extended family, but the household, the people who you share a house with, if you have a healthy household, they know exactly who you are. You're not fooling them. And if they respect and appreciate you, you're like, they must be right. And so I learned that. I was living very close to, it was the equivalent of Austin 4th Street, downtown 4th Street, which is thousands of dollars for rent. And I was living for $700 a month. It was just on the other side, the Bolden Creek side of Austin. And I was like, wow, like I could use this money for so many other things. I didn't have to work my guts out. Whether I traveled or not, my home was safe. When I came home, whether I saw the people or I was getting home later, I wasn't going home and so all of this stuff was happening for 17 years. It was real amazing. I lived in a Christian co-op. I lived in a hippie co-op that really, I had to keep it secret that I was a Christian at that point. But for them, it meant something terrible that I wasn't. I lived in all kinds of different places, but what happened was when I got started, I was looking at, hey, I need to build my team, right? That's what the real estate expert said. So I found a realtor. I went to a house, and to my surprise, there was the nice normal house that I had looked at on the online listing in the front. But when I went into the backyard, there was the original house that was built in 1905. And it was tiny houses before that was a term. It was a 400 square foot house. And I thought, how do I rent this guy out? So I put up dummy ad on Craigslist, and I said, okay, I could put both houses on one lease. I could put each house on its own lease because it had a little fence in between them, or I could rent by the room. Each room would have its own lease. I got 10x the response to a room for rent. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then it dawned on me, like, wait a second, this is what I thought I needed to be super rich to provide. Like, I know how to do this. And that's when it hit me. I was part of a real estate investor association, right? The little groups that meet. And I went to there and they said, listen, you don't want to, because rent by the room, it has, of course, high revenues. It's been done for years. It has high revenues, but by the end of the month, all of those profits are gone. And you had a huge headache. And Matt, you've been in the real estate world for a long time. Can you guess why these experienced investors were telling me that's the reason the profits disappear and the management headaches balloon?
My mind went, I'm not 100% sure if this is correct, but my mind went to somebody who didn't have enough self-discipline to not spend the money
Mm.
before the mortgage was due. Is that what it is? Or
That's without a doubt what happens, right? People take their money from their business rather than giving their business money. But these guys, what they shared is that Rent by the Room has a proven record of tenant conflict, high turnover, and consequent property damage, right? People do not live there longer than they want to. And this is when you go on a date with a girl, you don't try to impress her by saying, you know what, I rent a room with a bunch of strangers, right? Like, not a place but this is what those investors didn't know is I came from the intentional living community. Like, I knew they are the OGs at unrelated adults living together and for years in this successful, awesome way. And so that's when I was trying to do hey, I'm going to get into small multifamily. That can be my quickest way to financial freedom. But that's when it clicked and it hit me. Oh, wait, this thing that I had accidentally learned because of a marriage that didn't go the way I wanted to when I was really young. This stuff is incredibly financially lucrative in the real estate world and is in high demand. It was just shocking. I was just walking around dumbfounded. And I couldn't really tell anybody because the intentional living community is about as far away from the investment community as you can get, just using in generality. But the investment communities, they were far away from the intentional living community, even though they're both like so into personal growth and like contributing to the world. It was really I felt like I was the most happy guy that couldn't really tell anybody that would truly understand. It was really interesting so many days when that epiphany happened.
yeah, that is so interesting. So I'm curious, typically when you're going into these environments, I'm assuming that one of the people owned that property. Is that right? And then they started to invite other people in to
Mm,
live with them. Is that typically how you would establish like a co I guess my question ultimately is if you wanted to go down this path of establishing a co-living environment, how do you go about getting that? I'm curious how that worked for you, how you were able to convince people. And maybe since you already plugged into that community, you're able to just pull some people over into your home. So I'm just curious how you go about establishing that. And then I know that you have some great information as well on how successful and the longevity and everything that you've experienced with this form of management. So we'll get into that for a second, but I'm just curious your thoughts on actually establishing a successful co-living environment in a investment property. How does that work? How do you start that?
yes. First off, Matt, your question is is fantastic because in this niche co-living that is so new, it like it constantly needs defined. But your question, I almost always have is somebody asked a question, but they're pretending they know so much about it. And so I can't just try to answer the question. I have to like try to answer the pretend response, like for the feigned knowledge, right? So your ability to just ask a question straightforward and wow, awesome. This is what's rad so in 2019, when I came out with the first co-living course, we called it Beyond House. And so the reason is because there wasn't a term at that time. Co-living meant something like maybe a hostel. If you went to coliving.com, like it was short term, Airbnb, like rent by the room kind of situation, everything very short term. And so that wasn't the word to use. Over the years, co-living is now solidly the word for a rent by the room arrangement, but it's a high quality, it's an intentional living. It's not a rooming house or using a neighborhood house as a boarding house. These are very important housing options in each city, without a doubt. But this is separate from co-living, which people not only would want to live in, but to say with our renters, we call them house members, but our renters, they're there on average over 2 years. We have some people that have been there 7, 8 years. And that's because this kind of housing, if it fits the person, they don't want to leave. Just like you wouldn't want to leave a household that you fit in and is wonderful. So just to say what's really cool about it is with this beyond house hacking, when we were deciding what to call the course, right? I am a great teacher. I am not as wonderful as a marketer, but both my parents are teachers. So I kind of have this, but when people house hack, and everybody more or less knows what house hacking is, if they've been around real estate for enough, is they get a house and then they rent that out by the room to pay the mortgage. And then at the end of that 12, maybe 13, 14 months, they put that lease on they put that house on a traditional lease to one house, and then they move out and do it again. What is really awesome about co-living is it's beyond house hacking. First, you house hack and you get a house that between 6 and 11 people are going to share. And that might shock some people, but when I have them come visit one of our houses, they're like, wait, 10 people lives here, but it's so quiet. It's so clean. How much as an adult are you actually at your house? A lot of people, if they don't have kids, they're not at their house much. So when you have a house that only has maybe 5 people, it becomes a lot more difficult for community to exist. So to say is how somebody can get started is really any kind of house hacking strategy is a way, but you don't stop with the house hack. So you might be in a room, or if you want to syndicate, which house hacking, I've done that with almost not all of my properties, but I pull groups of people together. And so we'll house hack a lot of properties every month or year. And so somebody's in that room for the first 12 to 14 months. And then after that, they're going to go house hack again. But now that room is just leased out to somebody and it continues on a co-living property management strategy. Nobody knows in the house that person is a part owner of the house because that throws off equilibrium. But as far as how does it work, a person or a group of people get a house. One person, because of the mortgage, is going to live in that house as the primary resident for the first 12 months or so. And then a co-living property management strategy is put in place right away. And then that's how it goes. It's really quite fantastic. A house that would say gets $2,000 in rent is going to get about $6,000 to $6,300 in rent. And yeah, so it's actually half of the strategy is what people have been doing for years with, even before house hacking was termed by Brandon Turner. It's been around forever. But yeah. Oh, and you did ask Matt about how to fill this. So to say this is a question I get a lot, and filling it is so super duper duper easy. Any property management software out there is going to syndicate freely, and you are going to have people knocking down your door to rent. We do the same background screening. We don't have a minimum credit requirement nor income because everybody can afford $700 to $800. We're not worried about that. So we don't have as much risk as one house on one lease because we're collecting 7 checks or more. So we have the benefits of multifamily and the benefits of single family smashed together.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm curious. So I have multifamily apartment buildings ourselves, and I know how difficult it is to build community with individual apartments and having everybody get along and nobody's fighting or anything like that. Obviously, if they're sharing the same environment, sharing the same bathrooms, sharing the same kitchens, they're going to see each other time and time again. How often is it where there's some type of conflict where people are butting heads, or do you have a way to be able to mitigate any of those types of problems? Does that ever come up, or does that ever happen?
Oh, people always get along in the world all the time. 100. I'm joking. No, what? Yeah, just the world's such a peaceful, wonderful place. So this is something that is key. And before, when I first started and I was teaching people, I obviously, the course in 2019, we called Beyond House Hacking because I thought that was the most helpful factor for people to realize, hey, how wonderful house hacking is. With co-living, you can do that over and over and over and over again, right? Just team up. You just need one person in that team to live in it, blah, blah, blah. I thought it was the acquisition strategy. What I learned was, biggest help I can give to people is what I learned from this wisdom in the intentional living community. And in fact, any of your listeners, say they have a pad split house or they've started co-living, tenant conflict is a major problem. And I will say very clearly, let me say to say how much of a problem it is, pad split, which has put a lot of money and work into getting co-living out there, right? They publish Forbes articles. They do a lot of work. They're like the Airbnb of co-living. However, they have had such a difficulty with tenant conflict. They have no living room. This is what they recommend. Every pad split owner or host can do what they want. But what they recommend is you have no living rooms, because if you have living rooms, tenant interaction, which means tenant conflict, and they can't handle it. They offered a 24/7 tenant conflict hotline, right? So Matt, imagine you're in a call center, right? You're gonna solve some tenant conflict, and some people from across the country call you at 2 a.m. and they have a tenant conflict. How enjoyable do you think that conversation is going to be?
Yeah, I'm sure that's.
But to say is, I really want to throw this out there, because if somebody doesn't understand how to do tenant conflict, they should not get into co-living. Actually, when I was flushing out how to do this, and I learned everything from the intentional living community, seriously, like this group that started their co-op in 1979, I think. And so many of them, half of them went on to help start Whole Foods. So just to say, this house was the best of the intentional living community as far as their organization, their care for detail, is their whole system. I just learned so much from it. I didn't have to learn anything else. I just had to figure out, how does this apply in a property management renter scenario? And so to say, though, is when I was struggling with this, I was with my wife, and just to say the realness of this is, we had a person who was outside of our window yelling in through the window obscenities. And this is what happens when you do not have, this is not about tenant conflict. This is about the house not having its own conflict resolution process. And I said to my wife, I go, if I cannot figure this out, meaning how a house solves its own problems, how it uses this process I learned from the co-op down in Austin, I go, if I cannot figure this out, I go, we need to sell all of our houses and do something else, because it is not worth it. And thankfully, we figured that out. And so what to say is that conflict one is a very important thing. People who run from it, some people will teach, listen, have a living room, but make sure there's no TV in that living room, because it will create tenant conflict, and that's bad, and we don't know what to do with it. But tenant conflict is really important, because it is how people build relationship. When there's conflict and they work through that conflict on their own, then there's trust and appreciation. And then a household starts to form, and then people want to stay there no matter what, right? Those people, they got in, it's like with dancing, you're going to step on each other's feet. But once you've done that, you've got a damn good dance partner. And that is where, like, the awesomeness comes from. Not just on the renter side, the house member side, they love it, right? They have a household now when they had none before. But on the investor side, the house just goes on automatic, and you just make a shit ton of money. I could say more than that, but it really boils down to that. Tenant conflict is so important.
This is really interesting. I'm curious if you ever, and I don't know if you can legally do this or not, but I'm curious if there's any kind of personality qualifications, if you will, in order to be able to be in the space, right? Everyone has the same types of beliefs. And again, I don't even know how you'd be able to qualify that or find that out, but are you like completely mixing people no matter where it come from? And is that how it all works? Like, you're just putting a bunch of people together, or is there that matchmaker, if you will, where I think you'd be a good fit for this community because of your beliefs, whatever that looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And actually, the wisdom behind that question is worth $226 million. That's really, this is because, and that's how much that Silicon Valley startups have put towards since 2013. Ali came out with, they were a $50 million startup called Ali. Have you ever heard of them?
I haven't, I don't think.
No, because they went bankrupt. But their whole thing was, listen, we need to do like an eHarmony for co-living. We can figure out who fits together well. And and as they were failing, their idea was so impressive that this other company called Sqft, which was about a $30 million startup, they bought them. And you've probably not heard of Sqft because nobody has, because they went bankrupt too. But before they could complete their bankruptcy, a company called Common, which is a $112 million startup, bought them. And they actually just filed bankruptcy in June of 2024. So to say is your idea is something that this is massive money, massive data, and the leadership was very proven leadership in all of these companies. And there's a few other ones, but they total up to $226 million. And none of them have been successful yet. But the thing that I think the lesson is that the main thing is not who is living together, but it's the household system in place. So we create a household system. We call it a 40-point complete household system. And what it is, like any healthy household that somebody has been in, it has enough structure so that people feel safe. They feel there's a consistency, that they know how to resolve conflict. They know how long they can leave dishes in the sink, right? There's a shared understanding, but it's flexible enough. People love being there, right? Something that is a very strict boarding house. People don't want to be in that. They're just a cog in the machine. Mm-hmm. But so the key is we create a household system so that anybody who's reasonable and responsible can thrive in this system. It doesn't matter personalities, because let's face it, most people have moved in with their buddies with similar personalities, and in that living situation was not a favorite memory, right? Yeah. But that always, yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And do you put you mentioned it earlier, but I just want to really hone in on this. So you've got these rules and whatnot, and obviously when you're establishing a new facility or a new environment, someone's got to enforce isn't really the right word. Communicate how the property is run and how this happens. And again, I feel like it's the role of the parents to establish how those rules work in this healthy household type environment. So do you place people or a person in there whose job it is essentially to communicate how this works, or how does this environment flourish?
Yeah. And this is where your questions, again, you hit the $226 million question, right? Which is big. And the other one, it's called a live-in management approach, or like house mom, house dad. There was a gal who was my first property manager. Now, our co-living property management, we call household support, because a household runs itself. Now, where the property manager is going to take a secondary role in marketing, approving leases, they're going to do a lot of things so that the household itself can just enjoy life. But holy smokes, I was getting excited about a topic, but I had to jump back. But the live-in manager actually is, and this is a key thing. So this gal she was the first property manager that I'd hired. And she said she really liked the live-in management approach. And this was one of those agree to disagree situations we had. This was years ago. Anyway, now she's on the Living Smith teaching team. She's amazing. We've got a number of houses together and separate. What she though teaches is, she goes, listen, you live and manage a property. She goes, I could manage one property with about 30 hours of time. And she goes, I'm very efficient. She's one of those just people who her DNA is efficient being. That's different. So that's about 7 leases she can manage with 30 hours of time. With the system that we have, a complete household system for property management, one property manager can manage 140 leases
Wow.
with 40 hours of time.
Wow.
And so this is, I think it summed up best by this house that I lived at in the intentional living community. I said, "Hey, who's in charge?" And this guy said, "Nobody is in charge. So therefore everybody is responsible." And that's a real big thing. So when people sign a lease, there's a household covenant that is in there. So there's 10 things that they know, oh, this is what the house is about. And they understand that. And then the house really has to run itself. So if somebody is breaking a rule and they reach out to the property property manager will just say, "I'm sorry, you have a household covenant. You're going to have to talk to that person about it." Unless it's something that is some kind of breaking the law or a health thing. And then the property manager says, "Don't call me, call the police and seek safety." But just to say is there's nobody in charge. So therefore everybody takes responsibility. That breeds this sense of ownership. And that makes it where a house really runs itself. It's wonderful. They love it when the property manager shows up once a month to refill the toilet paper and the backup soaps and leaves candy for the house and says, "Hey, great to stop by. The house is looking great." So it's another big one is the live-in management approach. Unless somebody wants just that lifestyle and just wants one house, it's better to make sure that nobody is in charge, because then everybody can be held responsible for the running of the house.
Yeah, this is interesting. And as you were going through and explaining that, I almost feel like there's a um, sort of a self-filtering here as well, because obviously they understand what this is going in, and this is going to be for some people, and other people are like, "There's no way I'm going to ever put myself in that position." So I guess people filter themselves out to a certain extent, right? You typically probably don't have, people that would be considered assholes trying to live in this position because they would be unhappy themselves putting themselves in that position. Would you say that's the truth, or?
Yeah, we really try to make the house like a magnet. A magnet doesn't just attract the right thing, it also repel the things that don't fit. And each house has its vision statement. It knows who it is. When somebody comes and tours the house and they meet somebody and they see, oh, there's a chore board there on the wall. Oh, and the person says, "Hey, each of us does about 20 minutes of chores a week." Some people are like, "This is not the place for me." Or they notice how clean or quiet the place is. They just say, "This is not the place for me." Where the other people, they're like, I've got to get into this place. Put me on the waiting list. Do whatever you can. I need to be in this house. And that's every great community. So you are exactly right. Yeah. 100%.
And you mentioned Airbnb a few minutes ago. Obviously, there's a lot of cities and municipalities that are cracking down on that business model. Have you run into any types of issues with any jurisdictional? You have too many people living in the one space or anything like that? Has that ever come up, or do you have to watch out for that when you're intentionally going and trying to establish one of these types of communities?
So a little bit of both. So the first is, for lack of a better term, they're just trying to make Airbnb legal. And with co-living, the legislation trend is actually working the opposite for co-living. So because of the housing shortage, Airbnb has got labeled as the redheaded stepchild and is getting blamed. However, co-living is on the other side of that. So there's this legislation trend, for example, in Colorado on July 1st. So this month that we're recording, a legislation ban said any city or county or anything in our state that limits the number of unrelated adults that can live together is illegal. So there's health and safety rules, right? But that applies to people who are related or unrelated, where the typical zoning was no more than 3 unrelated adults, no more than 4 unrelated adults. Some had as many as no more than 5 unrelated adults. But there's this trend in legislation that is really working powerfully for co-living, where unfortunately the trend in legislation is for Airbnb is working powerfully the opposite way. I've got a few friends who have hundreds of Airbnb houses that are either have to choose between breaking the law or offloading all of those things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
so, but I wanted to underline that mostly, but to say is there are still zoning laws out there. And it's very important that just like when you're evaluating a property, or if you want to call it underwriting a property, knowing, hey, is this an HOA? What are the laws that are to this? And additionally, I would say, is there enough parking? Is the bathroom to bedroom ratio correct? Like the house, not just its zoning, but its other characteristics needs to fit the usage. So I would say when a person comes to us and say they have 500 properties, they would like us to manage for co-living. I would say 40 to 50% of those single family properties would work for co-living, and the rest just don't. And sometimes that's because of zoning.
Mhm.
Zoning meaning to the rules that you talked about. Hey, this says no more than 3 unrelated adults. Let's just follow the law.
Yep. You mentioned before how some people had talked about not having a living room or anything like that. Are you actually modifying the spaces to be able to eliminate those types of spaces and also create more bedrooms to be able to house more people? Or how does that work? Are you doing any type of modifications to the space to be able to, again, eliminate something or bring more online?
Yes. And this is something that's really cool. What we have found over and over again is whatever is best for the household is best for making money, is best for everything. There's never having to choose between the investors in the house and the renters in the house. We call the investors founders and we call the renters house members or residents. But to say, so many houses are made for families. That's what they were made for. This is great. A single family house, right? We now refer to as a detached house or wherever, but they were made for that. So like I have 2 little kids and it's really nice to have a playroom for them. And it's really nice to have a room that is more of our fireplace den room. And we have multiple of these living areas, or we'll just call living room. But with a co-living household, so a house of adults, there is actually, what's nice about this for anybody thinking about doing it is this is a very ironed out recipe. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to follow the recipe, right? Just like you're making pancakes. So with a living rooms, when we go look at a house, typically we're going to find 3 living rooms. One might be labeled a rec room, the other one labeled a fireplace room, right? But there's 3. What we will do is we will turn 2 of those into bedrooms. We add it in a way that it looks like it was always that way. So you have nice properties, and that means that it attracts nice renters, and renters take pride in it and they want to stay there forever. But the reason is this: when you have adults sharing a property, you don't need a place for the kids' toys to dominate a room. What you want is to have a place where, hey, there's a living room, people can sit and talk, they can read, they can turn on a TV, they can watch Lord of the Rings marathon, they can do all kinds of stuff, but there's only one place that they can accidentally leave their shoes or have to keep clean. When you have multiple of those places, that becomes difficult. And there's also usually at least a front or a back porch or sitting area, which is nice. So yeah, we always have one living room. And if we turn the other room into a bedroom, what's nice is another person in the household, up to 11 people, another person in the household is really appreciated. Usually the more people, the better, up to 11, because then you have a better chance of finding somebody that's on your schedule and might want to cook together, or like that you like dogs too, or fill in the blank. More people is always better.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's wrap up this segment by retouching on something you said earlier, just the order of magnitude, more income, more revenue that you're able to generate with this method. And something that you didn't mention yet that was in some of your materials that I read is your average occupancy rate, how long that's gone and what that's looked like over the course of however many years. Talk about those 2 things. just from a business perspective and how this is so different than a normal rental type situation.
Yeah, and this is to say the number one demand out there for leases. The number one demand is the single person lease. This changed in 2003. A lot of us real estate investors didn't realize this because we were going off the Census Bureau, which uses insurance or a financial household compared to if people are living alone or not. And the number one demand is the single person lease, which is a major contributor to the housing shortage. It's how houses in living units are getting used. So to say, one is if you do this, you are you're speaking to the number one demand out there. It is phenomenal. We have waiting list. It is not difficult to fill a house immediately. When people get started, what's really great is to do house hacking. And so then when I first started, I got a $316,000 house for $16,000. And that was including furnishing all the common rooms, putting a home warranty on it. Cause like we talked about, I'm not a handyman. And it was $16,000. And that made over $3,000 a month. And so guess what? I had a partner who provided all that $16,000. I've never used a penny of my own. And they were pumped because they got $1,500 a month for doing nothing. It's awesome. And so what we look at is very low entry to get started. It's very high cash flow because I think it provides the most help to renters out there right now. It is making the most money. And then as far as scaling goes, it comes to having what we call the gold standard of property management, which is what you had asked about, Matt, which is we have a lifetime occupancy average of 97%. That was even through COVID. We have our average renter stays over 2 years. And let me see if there's another, and I guess I mentioned is a property manager who's a 40-hour-a-week property manager. They don't need to have past experience, just training. They can manage 140 leases, which would be 20 properties at 7 leases per property.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Let's. Sorry, were you going to say something else? Right?
I thought of the one other the cash on cash ROI is a big thing that helps us compare apples to apples. Is if a property isn't getting 50% cash ROI, I don't get it. Most of my properties get 100% or more cash on cash ROI. This might not always be the case, but right now during the golden opportunity, I'm picking up the best one.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's shift a little bit to the life crafting segment. And again, just for the listeners out there, this is where we find out what Grant's highest ROI activities are that he has in his life and those steps that he takes to be able to deploy those practices. If we asked you, what is your highest ROI activity that you feel is beneficial to you in your life? And again, this can be on a personal side, this can be on a business side. What comes to mind for you as being the highest ROI activity?
Yeah, and I love this because this is how we move forward. It's how we enjoy things, not just have success, but enjoy that success. So I believe not just business, but life is a team sport. Everything is relationship, even relationship with ourselves. And for me, the start of that is every Monday morning, I take 3 hours. I think if I was better at it, I wouldn't need 3 hours, maybe just an hour, but I take 3 hours to review the last week. I look over everything. I just process it. I call it review, process, and plan. And then I look at what to do the following. And a lot of that is just being a good team member. The properties that we buy are almost always a team. The only properties I bought on my own was because I wanted to buy my 2 babies each a property so they could share it. And then I've never been tempted to become a realtor or to become a mortgage broker or a property insurance salesperson, even though there's money there, but I love the relationship with those people. They do amazing. And so that check-in that I have with myself each Monday, I just really protect that time. And every week is way more magical if I do that than if I just say, I don't need to do it this week. We'll be fine. So that's my number one thing.
Yeah, and it sounds similar to what I'm doing with life crafting. What does your process look like for evaluating what happened last week? Is it like looking to see what went right, what went wrong, making note of those and moving forward, or how do you process that? How do you go about identifying, was it a good week? Was it a bad week? Did you feel good, bad? How does that all work for you?
I think I'm always looking for more efficient ways because, like I said, it takes 3 hours, which is a long time. And I think that you got like a lot better process. For me, I simply just do just like thought vomit. Like I just write down everything that happened and I write down. It's just that's my process, just process. Then there are a number of I look at my 10 favorite wins on the personal side and on the business side. I have a number of KPIs with the team, with the business, with some of my health goals that I'm tracking because I like numbers. And then what I do is I write down what does it mean to me? So it can mean lots of things. And I try not to put a positive or negative on it. I try not to use like positive thinking, power of positive thinking. I just write down what it means to me. And then I switch into the planning mode. I say, what is the top 3 things that I can do this coming week? And then I write the rest down on a list so that I know they exist. I know there's other stuff, but those aren't the 3 things. So it's a process that I've let get overly complex. And Matt, your work and others in this field, I really need to learn from because it's so helpful. But for me, I need to make it more simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that's what this is all about, is figuring out how other people are doing it and picking up little pieces and little nuggets here and there, and plugging it into your day. Yeah. This has been a great conversation. I love this process. It's different, it's unique. You'll stand out. And actually, that's something too. I'm assuming you mentioned this before, how you have waiting lists and everything. When you place one of these communities in an area, I'm assuming that it just stands out on its own, because these aren't, you don't go and walk down the street and there aren't 100 different houses or 100 different buildings that you can go and rent that run this way. So I would imagine that you pretty well stand out in whatever market you put yourself in. Would you agree?
Yes, and it really is. And that's where I want everybody to do their path. You've used you've used that phrase in different podcasts, and I really like it because there is strategy, there is pros and cons, and there is somebody's path. And so if somebody's path is fill in the blank, do that path. If somebody is looking for that, let me suggest co-living because people so much need it. It is so massive. Whether you look at it from an environmental standpoint, or you look at it from a housing inventory scan or a workforce affordable living standpoint, it is so helpful. And holy moly, I liked your question so much. I got wrapped around it. Can you ask that again? Because I get just excited. I forgot.
Yeah, so no, it was just more or less about standing out in the
Oh,
marketplace. And again, it's such a unique offering. I'm assuming that there's going to be the people that are interested in this, are going to flock to it. And it's going to be something that's so
mm,
unique that, again, the people that are going to identify with it are going to be interested in it. So I guess and I don't know if you are currently doing any normal renting, but I guess I'm wondering, I guess a way to be able to quantify this would be a number of how many applications are you getting
mm,
in a certain amount of time compared to somebody else could compare to
mm.
what they're doing in on a regular lease type basis. How many applications are they getting in the same type of period? So I guess thoughts on that. What does that look like for you? What is that lease up process, that time? How much does the property stand out in the marketplace?
I think so. When we market, it's just we don't use any special anything. Somebody just seems to room for rent, and there's tons of room for rent out there. Actually, with when the market is going, when economy is booming, we're really popular, and then when the economy is suffering, we're really popular. What I would say is, and we're 100% co-living. We switched to that, and that's all we focused on. I can only say that we just can't buy houses, or now we take on third party houses to manage. We can't do that quickly enough because there is a lot of wonderful, amazing people out there that they don't want to sign a lease with other people and they don't want a whole place all to themselves and all of fill in the blank. I would say though, what's so surprising about our co-living houses is people have probably gone by them in a neighborhood. And the only thing you would notice different about this house is that maybe the yard looked a little bit better, because when you have multiple responsible adults, there's always one or two people that are crazy about the yard. And one time there was a house that I helped found. This was actually the second property I ever did. And we jokingly, I didn't say it to them, but jokingly, I referred to it as Delta Gamma divorced guys, because it was all divorced guys. And their main conflict that really gelled them together was who got to take care of the yard. It was so funny. Like they just loved taking care of that yard, and they built an in-ground fireplace in the backyard. They got approval from the property manager. And what to say is people hear about it and they think this is really unique in regard to the marketing, in regard to how it stands out on the street. It's just a normal everything. It's just a non-traditional household. And I think it really fits what is a household for the 21st century.
Yeah, that's interesting. Grant, if people want to learn more about you or maybe investments or any of the houses, what would be the best way to reach out and get in touch and learn more?
Yeah, I would love to help anyone. This is really quite a movement, and it's exciting. There's different voices out there. Like I shared, there's people who will say, hey, run from tenant conflict, try to lower tenant interaction. And what they're calling co-living is just rooming houses, right? It's a roadside motel wrapped around a kitchen, which is fine. That's great. But to say, if you want to get into co-living and what we've been talking about, this is different. This is something new. This is like all the wonderfulness the intentional living community has had, except now for mainstream people. They don't have to be Zen Buddhist to move into a Zen Buddhist intentional living community. But if they want to, if you go to colivinginvestment.com/Matt. So colivinginvestment.com/Matt. I put in there because this is a nuanced thing and it is new. I have in there is people can schedule a 30-minute call to talk to any of our coaches and just see, hey, does this fit them and how would it work for where they're at? And that's my best for anybody interested in that, because I went from renting a room and delivering Domino's to financial freedom in 2 years. I had over a $2 million net worth in 2 years, and that made all my dreams come true. And I get like super meaningful work. Like I love this shit. So just to say, anybody who's listening, check out the website, schedule a call. Maybe you'll get to talk with Jackie. She can tell you about the in-house management versus others. But yeah, I would love to talk and help anybody.
Yeah, I love it. Grant, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank Matt. It's really an honor. Like it's phenomenal. And for those who are in the tribe that you're leading the charge of, hey, a landlord, a property manager, and for a renter, for any of those to really win, like both have to win, like we're all in this together. That's what worked the best. Anyway, I love that. I sign my name by that every time. So thanks for leading that charge.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Graham. Beautiful. Thanks for joining us on this captivating episode of Invest in Square Feet. I hope our conversation with the brilliant Grant Shipman has sparked some new ideas about the exciting future of co-living spaces. If you enjoyed Grant's insights and wisdom, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a glowing review. Share the episode with your fellow real estate enthusiasts, and let's keep this community thriving. Remember, the co-living industry is brimming with potential, and with the right strategies, the sky's the limit. Stay inspired, stay innovative, and keep sharpening those investment skills. I'm Matt Shields, signing off. Until next time, let's get to work.